This podcast is brought to you thanks to the generous support of Whistler Blackcomb, leaders in delivering adventure.
I recall going down into the Grand Canyon on a hike, and I was probably over-prepared. I had a satellite phone, I had extra bottles of water. I love at the Grand Canyon at the Visitor Center how they rate the trips on the board. It has a number of sandwiches and the number of water bottles. Bigger the trip, more sandwiches, more water bottles.
This is Delivering Adventure. This is the podcast that explores what it really takes to share adventure like a pro with your friends, your family, and as a profession. My name is Chris Kaipio, and I'm coming to you from Whistler, British Columbia. For the past 30 years, I've made a career out of delivering adventure in the mountains, on snow, and on the water. During that time, I've helped thousands of people to push their limits and to achieve things that they felt were beyond their abilities. I've also trained hundreds of adventure guides, built training programs for guiding organizations, and I've written a book called The Power to Influence. Now, I'm turning my attention to launching this podcast. Joining me as my co-host is my good friend, Jordy Shepherd. Jordy is an internationally certified ACMG IFMGA Mountain guide trainer, an avalanche educator, rescue specialist, and a former park warden and park ranger. Jordy currently serves as the Vice President of the Association of Canadian Mountain Guides, where we have been working together on the board of directors. In addition to all of his work in the adventure guiding industry, Jordy also runs a successful real estate company in Canmore, Alberta, where he currently lives with his family. In this introductory episode, Jordy and I are going to set the stage for what you can expect to hear on this podcast going forward and why this is valuable to you. Well, here we are, Jordy. Episode 1, finally. How does it feel?
Well, Chris, I don't need to tell you, but I'll tell our audience here. It's great to be launching this project. It's been a long road. Quite exciting and a lot of learning. There's been the tech side of things that we've had to work through. We haven't had a lot of advice, or when we don't have a producer. It's just two of us with our microphones and our computers, and just trying to get this project off the ground. And it's really been amazing to have realize that we have all this connectivity in the adventure industry, and the more we reach out through this season and then through subsequent seasons, there's a lot of us that deliver adventure all around the globe, and it's just exciting to feel like a small cog in a very large, complex set of wheels, and trying to help people get together on this idea of how do we deliver adventure.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, Jordy, to consider that neither of us started off as podcasters, and here we are with our own podcast. It's also fair to say that this has been a large adventure for both of us. Can you outline for our listeners how we even got here?
Yeah, well, I'd say it's mostly your fault. I guess it started about probably almost 3 years ago now, when we worked together to deliver an online training session for the Association of Canadian Mountain Guides, the ACMG, as a professional development session. And you asked me to, along with some others, to help out with that. And as I recall, the title of the session was Delivering Adventure.
Yeah, that's funny. I had forgotten about that. We went through almost 100 different names for this podcast, and that is the one that we finally ended up settling on. We ended up really going full circle there. So it's the end of September now, and I think I pitched the idea of doing this podcast sometime back in January. What was it about this project that interested you?
Well, I've always had an interest in mentorship. I actually started the mentorship committee within the Association of Canadian Mountain Guides, and pitched that idea to the board of directors a number of years ago, and we do have that in place now. And I feel like this is a piece in the mentorship progression, is for us to bring on a bunch of folks who do things in all walks of the adventure industry, and and how they do it. And I'm constantly learning as we do this. There's a lot of podcasts out there, but only, not very many talk about the how-to from the perspective of the experts. And you and I, Chris, are experts in the field of delivering adventure, and we come from that perspective. But we also get the opportunity to bring together all these other different people, and from some industries that we're not as familiar with, as you'll see through the coming season. We get to interview these experts and really make something that appeals to a broad audience. So this is for guides, parents, sports instructors, and coaches, recreational enthusiasts. Kind of there's a little bit of something for everybody here. I think there'll be takeaway messages in every episode, and there's going to a lot of discussion on things like the topic of risk, and some hammering down some individual skills, for example. And we, at some point, we're all leading ourselves and others through situations that are challenging. And the idea of producing a podcast that helps people to do that better really appealed to me. So I guess one of the first things we should talk about is, what is adventure? And what does delivering adventure even mean? That is the title of our podcast here. So, Chris, what does delivering adventure mean to you?
Well, Jordy, it should come as no surprise that I've given this question a lot of thought. To start with, I think each of us has a slight variation of what an adventure is. If you asked 10 people for their definition, you probably get 10 slightly different answers. However, if I were to put forward a definition of adventure that encapsulates all of the key components, it would sound something like this. An adventure is an experience that has an element of adversity that pushes us outside of our comfort zone and ends well. This means that adventures can include learning new things, traveling to new places, pushing ourselves to perform at a higher level, taking risks, and generally just challenging ourselves. Viewed this way, we can experience an adventure participating in outdoor sports, on our vacations, in our work and business lives, and at home. While adventure is often thought of as something we experience doing high-risk activities in exotic locations, in reality, our lives are full of adventure. If we break it down, an adventure has 3 things that are universal. Adventures require us to overcome adversity. That adversity tests us in some way, and that experience is remembered as being positive afterwards. When we talk about adversity, we're referring to risk, discomfort, challenge, hardship, or even the unknown. When we talk about that adversity testing us, we're referring to the feeling that we get when we push ourselves outside of our comfort zone. That feeling is usually excitement, but it can involve a level of stress or anxiety. However, to avoid having an experience become a misadventure, the experience needs to be managed in a way that doesn't overwhelm us, because at the end of the day, the experience has to be viewed as being positive. When it comes to delivering adventure, the key is to manage the experience in a way that tests people, but doesn't break them or leave them bored. In my experience, getting this part right is where many people can struggle. The point of this podcast is to help people to struggle less. However, one key thing that can make delivering adventure difficult that we need to address right at the start is that adventure is very subjective. Each of us has a different level of risk tolerance and resiliency. I call this a sense of adventure. Adding to this is that we all perceive and remember events differently. This can mean that 2 people that experience the exact same thing can walk away with completely different memories and perspectives of the event afterwards. As an aside, what can make it even trickier is that over time, those different viewpoints can actually drift further apart as we retell the stories to ourselves. Now, Jordy, let me share an embarrassing story to highlight the point of subjectivity. The story is also an example of what I hope listeners will hear going forward, which is honest, real-life experiences that we can all learn from. 20 years ago, I was guiding part of a corporate group around Blackcomb Mountain. The group consisted of 5 advanced intermediate skiers. It was the second day we'd been together, and we had already done quite a bit of adventurous skiing. The weather was overcast, and it had snowed all morning. Just after lunch, we met up with another part of our group. This group consisted of 3 snowboarders who were being guided around by a snowboard instructor. Just after we met up, the clouds lifted a bit and it stopped snowing. Seeing this, the other instructor and I decided that we should try to take our group down the Blackcomb Glacier. The Blackcomb Glacier is an advanced run that travels down an alpine valley. It is one of the signature runs in Whistler, and on a nice day, the experience is phenomenal. We put our idea to the group, and they agreed to head up to the top of the mountain and then descend down the glacier. When we arrived, it was around 2 p.m., and we had the run to ourselves. It was a high overcast, but the light was okay. It was about 15 centimeters of untracked snow, and everyone was excited. Standing at the top of the glacier, this seemed like a great idea. As it would turn out, though, that would be the last happy moment I would have that day. The first person that went down the beautiful untracked run made 3 great turns before promptly crashing and losing one of their skis. One thing I found is that when skis come off in deep snow, it is like they can have a mind of their own, and they rarely seem to end up being where you think they should be. 20 minutes went by before a ski patrol arrived and found the ski. Relieved, I helped my student to get her skis back on so that we could catch up to the rest of the group who were waiting below us. Unfortunately, by that point, the weather had closed in again and the light had become quite flat. It became very difficult to pick out the features in the snow, and at some points I couldn't even tell if I was moving. To make things worse, some of the members of the group started to get quite tired. This slowed us down even more. Instead of delivering a beautiful experience, the run had turned into what felt like a never-ending marathon of suffering. When we finally reached the bottom of the mountain, it was 4:30 and getting dark. This is when a curious thing happened, however. At this point, half of the group, including myself, saw the experience as a complete misadventure. I felt terrible for what had happened, and I felt personally responsible, which, in fact, I was. However, the other half of the group loved it. They loved the adversity and the challenge. The same experience ended up being seen completely differently by 2 groups of people based on their sense of adventure. From my perspective, I would never have done that again, and I haven't. As a guide, I was trying to deliver an experience that was a 10 out of 10 for me, when a 3 out of 10 experience would have made them much happier and would have been far less complicated and far less stressful for everyone. However, when it comes to delivering adventure, knowing how much risk to take, how much adversity people are willing to push through, and how to manage the experience so that it is seen as being positive afterwards by everyone, takes experience and awareness. Sorry, Jordy, that was a long-winded answer to what should have been a simple question. So let me turn this around and ask you, How do you define an adventure, and what does delivering adventure mean to you?
Well, Chris, to me, defining an adventure is something that's challenging. Yes. If it's not challenging, I kind of categorize it more as an experience. And I've had lots of great experiences, but it's not until it feels like there was some sort of a challenge and maybe a bit of adversity, but it doesn't even have to be a lot of adversity. Just like, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally challenging and a bit out of my comfort zone. Um, not too far out of my comfort zone is what an adventure is to me. And then delivering adventure is really what I've strived to do for my entire career as a guide. It's trying to find for an individual or a group, because that can happen too, right? Where you've got a group of people who all are on different pages, and it's trying to figure out what is going to be best for them. And they might not know what is best for them. They've never been in the backcountry. They've never been on a rock climbing crag before. They've never hung on a rope and trusted that. And so trying to figure out on the scale of challenging, how challenging actually is this for them. And so it's not a lame adventure or non-adventure for them. They're like, well, we went to the rock climbing crag and tried rock climbing for the first time, and it was like climbing a ladder, and there's no point in doing it anymore because I've experienced it now. And that's the thing, is it was an experience. So just, sort of bringing them up through progression where they can get to the point of a feeling of accomplishment, but also that continual recognition that there is more, and that they leave that experience or that adventure as being kind of a bit more hungry for more, and not wanting to just say either been there, done that, or been there, tried it, terrified, and I'm never going there again.
So, Jordy, you've guided people in heli skiing, backcountry skiing, and climbing adventures in many different places. Based on your experiences, you must have some great stories of adventures that you've had. Is there one that you can share with our listeners that helps to set the stage of what they can hear more of going forward?
Well, I've had a number of them, Chris, but one that comes to mind is climbing El Capitan in Yosemite Valley via a big wall rock climbing route there. I was down there climbing with a friend, and I recall we were both kind of partway through our mountain guide training courses, and I was feeling pretty strong as a rock climber, but I hadn't done really much for big wall climbing, and it requires different techniques, and you're placing a piece of gear in a crack and then standing on it instead of free climbing and pulling yourself up, and then you're getting as high as you can and you're placing another piece. And so we're talking, like 1,000-meter, 3,000-foot wall there. And we didn't choose to do one of the easiest routes. We climbed the shield route, which is, I think it's rated A3 plus out of a scale of 5 in terms of aid climbing, being the A. And so, yeah, it's kind of up there. And I placed a lot of protection in rock, but often not with actually testing it. When you're free climbing, right? And you're climbing up and placing a piece and clipping the rope and climbing up past it. And it's there as safety if you fall. And ideally, it's a very good, strong piece, and each piece is. So I felt pretty good about that, but I hadn't actually fallen on every piece to that point. And so now we launched, and we spent 5 days standing on every piece. And some of them pretty funky too, like placing a mashie for the first time, which basically is a piece of malleable metal on the end of a swedged cable. And so you're sort of mashing that into an open book style, not even a crack. You're just molding it in to a space in the rock, and then trying to stand on that tentatively, and recognizing that if you place a couple of those, if you fall, one pops, the one you're waiting, then the other one you're probably going to get up, kind of half a meter to a meter head of steam as you head downwards, and then quite possibly pop the next one. And then, yeah, momentum starts to build up with those not great pieces. And so, and on that route, there's really not much for ledges either. So we were portaledge camping, hanging off of the bolt anchors for 5 nights or 4 nights, 5 days, I guess it was. And we had the benefit of it was a beautiful 5 days in California in the Yosemite Valley, but it came right after a big storm. And so where it snowed in May, I think it was, we were there, and it snowed right to valley bottom, and the walls cleared off. People, a bunch of people got rescued. And so there was actually nobody above us on a fairly popular route. And so we launched in sunshine, but with water running down from still meltwater. And so as we were placing gear, it was coming down our arm through our armpits for the first little bit. But then, things dried off in the California sun, and we're hanging there on our belay seat, taking turns leading and listening to music and eating canned food out of the haul bag and hauling all of our water with us. And yeah, quite an adventure, really. Just and quite special to be, climbing for 5 days and then seeing everybody starting to come out below us and start climbing up towards us, following us up the wall. It was really neat.
Okay, Jordy, that definitely qualifies as a big adventure. Thinking about how high off the ground you would have been there made me very, very nervous. I've done a bunch of rock climbing in the past, but there's a big difference between top roping in Squamish and big wall climbing on El Capitan. So let me ask you a follow-up question. When it comes to adventure, how would you define your philosophy?
For delivering adventure, it's got to be safe. And so then it comes with the, you don't always have that safety net, like literally a safety net below you when you're at height. And so it's like, how am I going to do this to deliver adventure to a person or a group, have them feel like there's risk, but really I know there's very little to almost no risk. And so that's the catch. Is how do you find something that's challenging for somebody or for a group who all want sort of different things or at different levels, and so that's where it's kind of a combination. It's the adventure, but it also has the experience flow. So for some people, even if they feel like it wasn't quite the adventure that they were looking for, it was still an excellent, amazing experience. And so I'll turn that around now to you, Chris. When it comes to delivering adventure, what's your personal philosophy on that?
Yeah, Jordy, my philosophy is very similar to yours. But before I get there, I think it's important to talk about why we need adventure in the first place. For most of us, the adventures that we have are often remembered as being some of the best moments of our lives. They help us to grow and they allow us to improve. This is why I consider the ability to deliver adventure to be a serious business, although it is often a lot of fun in the process. So viewed through this lens, my philosophy of adventure delivery has changed over time. When I started teaching skiing in the early 1990s, I spent 2 seasons in Sunshine Village in Banff, just down the road from where you live, Jordy. At that time, the mantra among my colleagues was to go big or go home. The philosophy was that you should get out there, put your big person pants on, push past your fear, and go for it. Worrying about the consequences was something we really didn't talk about. We also certainly didn't spend much time thinking about whether the decisions we were making were good or not. And we absolutely didn't reflect upon the decision-making process that we used. Back then, traits like good judgment, foresight, and just being responsible really weren't that celebrated. As a result, I did plenty of dumb things, and so did many of my peers. Most of us got away with them, but some didn't. I've watched a lot of my peers end up getting hurt, getting their clients hurt, having super stressful days, having unhappy clients, and having to deal with stressful situations. Fast forward 30 years, and my view of risk-taking has changed a lot. For me now, my philosophy is to go big and make it home. When I say go big these days, I'm referring to the idea of pushing yourself outside your comfort zone, but not so far as to lead to disaster. As you rightly noted, Jordy, adventure should be exciting, not terrifying. The whole point of an adventure is for it to be a positive experience. This is how we grow and improve. People rarely get better at anything if they're in survival mode the whole time. They also rarely enjoy experiences or experience personal growth if they spend too much time being terrified, demoralized, frustrated, or embarrassed. It also won't be much of an adventure if you get hurt, lost, or worse. I think that we should all try to go big in the sense that we are pushing ourselves to do new things, to be better, or to go farther, but the goal should be to finish in better shape than when we started. When it comes to delivering adventure, success is making it home.
One piece of advice that I have for our listeners is I wrote an article for Gripped Climbing Magazine, a Canadian climbing magazine, and it was advice for climbers. It had a bunch of safety messaging in it, but one of the things really is take baby steps in your adventure, in seeking adventure. So don't go big, as you said there, Chris. I totally agree. Don't go big right away. That tends to move you more towards a higher probability of misadventure. And so set yourself up for success by taking these smaller steps and working your way up, gain those base level skills and confidence. And it might not feel like a lot of adventure right at the start, and that's fine because you're kind of in that educational learning phase. And that's the patience piece that comes in, where again, you have misadventures if you are not patient. So be patient and always think we could come back and do this another day, or today's not the day to do that, but we could do something else. And have a list, like actually create a list and keep it with you. Our phones do that nicely for us now. And so then you don't have to be, you're heading towards objective A and it's like, I'm starting to get the feeling this isn't going to work out, or we're starting too late, or the weather's not great. And so then you can just very quickly, with your decision making, go to a plan B or C that you already have listed out. And it really helps your decision making to have that list in front of you. And then you can also see your progression as you're going through. Okay, well, I've ticked that. Now I want to do this as my next adventure when it's appropriate and when I have the skill set.
So, Jordy, in your career as a rescue specialist, you have seen a lot of misadventure. What do you think stops people from being able to achieve an adventure? Like, what are those obstacles?
Well, Chris, I've responded to quite a few incidents in a variety of environments. So everything from water to mountains, glaciers, avalanche issues, lost, missing people, people that have wanted to go missing and not be found, parked their car and disappeared out of society, but they didn't tell us that. So we searched for them for quite a while before the police figured that out, that actually they weren't even there anymore or in the country. So, Chris, the common themes that I've seen in terms of people having misadventures is lack of communication, not being prepared, biting off way more than they can chew, with big day and on bad weather, and just not having. Sometimes it's just common sense, and it's strange because when things start to go sideways, common sense can actually, what is, me saying as the searcher or the rescuer, oh, wow, why didn't you just do this? The reality is people do stop thinking in kind of straight linear fashion, just in general, and doing things that they wouldn't otherwise do. Some of the other reasons why people have misadventures and don't do well in their quest for adventure is group communication issues, disagreements. People have different expectations right from the start, but they don't really get into it with each other before the trip. And one person is summit or plummet, and the other person is like, no, I could have turned around a long time ago, and just not being on the same page.
So, Jordy, you're totally right about setting expectations and making sure that everyone's expectations and goals actually line up. Aside from that, what do you think is one of the most common mistakes that people can make?
Well, Chris, really, I think a big part of it is planning or lack of planning, and that can be from trying to do too big a trip without having the experience or the skills. It could be not bringing the correct equipment. It could be not reading the conditions right, or going out when the weather is really poor, or trying to do a big hiking trip when there's actually a lot of really punchy snow. And so it's a few things will make that worse. And one is not having very good communication. And nowadays, there's really no excuse not to have communication. I think multiple forms of communication is really what's recommended. And having the ability to get out to the outside world just really gives you, if you're having a bad time of it and things are going poorly, just being able to let someone else know that where you are on the planet and that things are going poorly really gives you a big sense of relief. And it doesn't seem important until it is. And people say, well, that costs money, and there's, the service and the device to buy or rent or whatever. But really, it does suck to get rescued, no doubt about it. But what's even worse is not getting rescued if you need to be rescued. And I can say that as a rescue specialist that has been rescued myself. You can say, oh, I know everything about everything, or I'm very prepared even, but when you need it, you need it. And that's what the services are there for. But then on top of that, be prepared to be out on your own for a period of time. So like I recall going down into the Grand Canyon on a hike, and I was probably over prepared. I had a satellite phone. I had extra bottles of water. I love at the Grand Canyon at the visitor center how they rate the trips on the board. It has a number of sandwiches and the number of water bottles. Bigger the trip, more sandwiches, more water bottles. They've really broken it down. And but seeing that at the visitor center there made me really realize we're in this desert environment, which changes through elevations, and we're going down. And then there's all these signs that say what goes down must come back up, or down is optional and up is mandatory, which is also great, right? And it's all the signage kind of catches your eye, and you're like, that's for a reason, because they do have a huge number of rescues. And so I go out with the idea that I don't want to be one of those people that is using the system, for rescue. However, that I can call for rescue if I need to be rescued. Chris, going forward, what can our listeners expect to hear on this podcast, and how will that help them?
If you're listening to this podcast going forward, you're going to hear top experts from across the adventure industry share the inside perspective on how you can deliver better adventures to yourself, your friends, your family, and as a profession. What makes this podcast unique is that it is going to be like the backstage pass to the adventure delivery industry. Jordy, the people that you and I are talking to, they're not just our guests, they are our peers. Many of these people are people that we have worked with, we've worked for, trained, admired, or we can relate to. We can relate to their struggles, their experiences, and their achievements. Because in many cases, you and I have been in a similar situation. This is what has already allowed us to have very open, honest, and informed conversations. Because of this, we're going to hear what those top experts in the field are thinking, how they manage real-world situations, what advice they wish they knew when they started, what mistakes they've made, what they have learned from them, and most importantly, what they want you, the listener, to know. Because these people care. They love what they do, and they want you to love it too. They want to help you to succeed, and so do we. This is why we have launched this podcast.
Yeah, Chris, and if people are aspiring to get outdoors and have adventures and be a adventure leader of any description, this is going to be, we're hoping it's going to be very, very helpful for them to have that inside track on the adventure sports, outdoor adventure industry. And really our focus is it's not just one type of, adventure, just mountain stuff or just water stuff. We're going to be talking to people from all parts of the industry. We're really focusing on having a good diversity of people and activities, so that you're not just hearing about, well, how to be a better ski coach or how to be a better mountain guide. It's going to be very, very diverse.
Yeah, Jordy, those are a couple of really good points. Just to add on to what you're saying, as you mentioned earlier, most podcasts that specialize in adventure talk about people, places, or activities. What makes this podcast different is that it is going to examine the how. How can we deliver better adventures to ourselves and others? This commitment to the how is represented in our logo, which is actually the blueprint of how to deliver adventure. You can find out more about that on our website. Going forward, if you're an enthusiast, you will get to hear what the pros are doing. If you are a professional in the adventure industry, you will get to hear what your peers are doing. We've spent much of this episode sharing our ideas about adventure. Now, let's turn it over to you, the listener. What do you think? What does adventure mean to you? More importantly, we'd like to hear how we can help you to deliver adventure more easily, more often, and more efficiently. You can reach us through any of our social media feeds or send us an email. You can find all of our contact details at deliveringadventure.com. Also, don't forget to follow or subscribe through your favorite streaming service so that you don't miss out on future episodes. To finish off this episode, we're going to play a few of the comments about adventure that we've recorded from some of our upcoming guests. In order, they are Sarah Hunican, Barry Blanchard, Tracy Fraser, Greg Hill, and Lindsay Dyer. Thanks for listening.
I guess to define adventure would be something you don't know the end result of. I guess it starts with a curiosity and has an element of unknown.
You don't get adventure without suffering. If you are going to West Edmonton Mall and getting on the roller coaster ride, or doing it in California or United States, wherever you do it, Callaway Park here in Alberta, you will feel an adventure, but there's a significant difference between, how uncomfortable you're going to be, and then also how much risk you're exposed to. So for me, suffering is a necessary part of adventure, as is risk. And the difference I would draw between the roller coaster ride and true risk is that the roller coaster ride is a thrill. You're not supposed to get hurt on the roller coaster ride. It does happen very, very occasionally, but it's not supposed to happen. Whereas mountains are real risk, and you can be hurt in a number of ways at almost any time.
Adventure, I think, feels new and fresh and calm and exciting. A lot of times for me, adventure is a bit of a solitary experience. So I may be traveling with a group of people, but it's something that for me, I'm going to take away for myself. To deliver it, I think about it when I'm thinking about delivering adventure, it's taking a group of people safely somewhere where they might have been before or might not have been before, where they're going to feel the feeling of, wow, this is neat, this is cool, this is something I might not have done before. And again, I think there's a memory component to it. They take a memory away with them.
That's what guides do, is we deliver adventure by taking people into areas that they wouldn't be able to go on their own, and we allow them to push their boundaries in a comfortable setting, because it's quite hard for most people to really push their limits through fear or just uncertainty. And once you have somebody that's certified and qualified and spent years honing their skills, is that they put a huge amount of trust in us that allows them to push their limits, and that's kind of our goal, is to take them and push their limits and take them to just these incredible places. And I mean, I personally love it all winter long when I'm guiding ski touring, is where you just know that you're taking somebody to a place they wouldn't go, and to them it just feels adventurous. And like I mentioned, the whole guiding thing, it really is, it just allows them to enjoy the adventure without all the anxiety and worry and stress that would come if they were trying to do it on their own. And we kind of free them from a lot of the worries so they can fully embrace the adventure.
Yeah, so adventure to me, it's called life. I love that quote that says it's not an adventure until something goes wrong. And I think that's life, is stepping out into the unknown and problem solving and recognizing that you can do more than you thought that you could. And that can happen on a mountain, or it can happen in everyday life. And so I think it's just a mindset.